Well, it's just 6 days until Christmas and less than 24 hours until the release of The Rise of Skywalker, Episode 9 of Star Wars. So today I wanted to bring up a topic based off of watching The Mandalorian today. Mandalorian Episode 7, directed by Deborah Chow. Just an awesome, awesome episode. Really one of the best of the season. And Deborah has definitely put together 2 episodes that are stunning episodes and leaves a lot to be anticipated for the Obi-Wan series that she's directing. Really excited for that as well. So there's a lot in Star Wars, especially in the Disney Plus side, to be super excited about. With The Rise of Skywalker, of course, the last couple of days have been crazy. Been everybody everywhere going different directions. It's great. It's horrible. It's one thing and another. There's spoilers everywhere. It's a nightmare. And so I'm going to avoid those topics as much as possible. What I'd like to talk about is a topic that kind of ties in with the movies and The Mandalorian, and that's Force users, Force sensitives, and how they learn to use their Force skills. So, The Mandalorian today, we saw the Baby Yoda display a couple of skills that were quite powerful. One of them more of a dark side, one of them more of a light side. And there's precedent for the powers that he showed. He didn't, he or she, right, that didn't bring forth anything new to the canon. But the question is, how did he learn them? We tie back to the earlier episodes of The Mandalorian where we saw him display Force powers as well. And we now have seen this Baby Yoda character display very powerful Force skills. We know that he's 50 years old, so there's certainly some time that is unaccounted for. We don't know what happened prior to The Mandalorian. We don't know where he comes from, what his lineage is, what has transpired over the last 50 years, and it leaves a lot of question. The one thing we do know is that he moves around and has the characteristics of a toddler, even at 50 years old. The question then is, how do you learn those skills? How do you learn those powers? I want to just reference a few other examples of Force sensitives, Force users, who seem to have displayed some Force powers without specific training. And just going backwards from The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda, we go back to the ending scene of The Last Jedi and what everybody calls Broom Boy. He pulls that broom to himself using the Force, and to best of anybody's knowledge, he's not had any training. We go back to the most divisive, perhaps, Rey, in that when we first are introduced to her in The Force Awakens, she doesn't know anything about the Force. Yet, by the time she finishes The Last Jedi, she's displayed some incredible Force powers with very little training. And then specific to some of the powers that she displayed, they weren't trained at all. There's a couple of examples. The first one that's blatant is when she does the mind read push back on Kylo. Kylo was pushing into her mind, and she then pushed back, sort of reflexively. We also see her used in a cut scene from The Last Jedi, where she force runs at a high speed, unnaturally high speed. And we also see her lift the boulders in The Last Jedi that a lot of people got upset about. Those those Force skills showed that were displayed even though she had very little power or very little training. Very high power, very little training. The point that's perhaps worth a little bit of discussion here is her abilities with the lightsaber. And I've mentioned this before. I don't think that using a lightsaber per se is anything unique to Force sensitivity or Force powers. Using a lightsaber is something anybody who picks up that weapon could do. The effectiveness of using that lightsaber, however, comes through practice, training, and we believe that the reflexes, the enhanced reflexes that Force users have, and their ability to see slightly into the future, allows them to use that weapon effectively against things like blasters, even in hand-to-hand combat with other lightsaber users. Those weapons could be very deadly, even to oneself with the lightsaber if used improperly. So I don't believe that those are necessarily trained Force skills. They're certainly trained skills as far as any combat is concerned. So I'll put to the side Rey's ability to use a lightsaber, just to use it. The effectiveness of how she uses it, I think, are enhanced by her skills, her reflexes, which leads me to the other topic, her piloting skills. In the Force Awakens novelization, we see that Rey mentions she's been flying different vehicles of every kind since she was able to walk. And well, so she has some piloting skills, but I believe, again, those enhanced reflexes and ability to see slightly forward into the future allow her to learn skills faster, to be more reflexive, to be able to pilot a ship more nimbly than somebody who is not Force sensitive. And I believe that Rey had probably always had those powers. What I mean is the enhanced reflexes and the ability to see slightly in the future. And I say this based off of a discussion I had about Anakin. Anakin in The Phantom Menace races that pod racer unnaturally well for a human of any ability, of any kind of training. And he had been doing those, he had been flying a pod racer, been flying for years before The Phantom Menace, and he's only about 8 years old in that. So again, I think there's no reason to believe that Anakin had been trained on using those Force powers. They're kind of inherent. Those Force powers aren't necessarily trained. They're things that a Force sensitive, somebody who has Force abilities, would naturally discover on their own. And how much of this can be trained and how much of it is just part of what they bring to the table. I think if we go all the way back to A New Hope, and the first time we see Luke, and he first picks up the lightsaber and he's twisting around. Again, that's proof that you don't necessarily have to have Force training with the Force to use a lightsaber. But he talks about his skills shooting womp rats with his ship. So again, I think Luke, his whole life, had these Force skills that made him an extraordinarily good pilot, extraordinarily good at targeting and shooting things. I think this comes to just through his natural abilities as somebody who is a Force sensitive. So if we look at Force sensitives and we tie all of these examples together, how much of this is due to training? And I know there's been a lot of complaints about Rey and the lack of training she's had, but I want to just throw it out there as a point of discussion. Feel free to comment and give me your thoughts. For me, I see something characteristic with Rey and also Baby Yoda that I think training addresses, and that is how to control your emotions, to direct them, hone them, and control them in a way that keeps you from slipping into the dark side. We see both of them use emotions to heighten their power, to heighten their strength, and even in some of the powers that they display come from what we would likely associate with dark side energy, with that emotional power that they bring into it. And I think the training has more to do with being able to focus and not fall into dark side powers, and to stay balanced as a force user, somebody who can control themselves in heightened states of adrenaline, heightened states of combat, or situations that they find themselves in where emotions might take over. And the training helps them to center, to be focused. And we see that with Qui-Gon in The Phantom Menace, where he focuses, he centers. And I think that comes from his Jedi training. We know that there are other Force users throughout the galaxy, both dark side and light side, that are not Jedi, they are not Sith. They're just simply Force users throughout the galaxy. And I don't think it's unreasonable to think that they have learned some powers just through natural day-to-day activities where something might happen that they react to, and they find out that they actually were able to control something. I don't know if it's a good example or not, but I'll bring in Harry Potter as an example, where in the first movie we see Harry react, and he uses his magic on the environment around him. And in the novel, in the book, we see other examples where they say, "Did you do this or this or this in your past?" without any explanation, and that comes from the magic ability. He wasn't trained in using those magic abilities. He didn't even know he was a wizard. Yet he displayed some magic skills, some powers that just came naturally through his interactions day to day and emotional situations he found himself in. I don't think it's very unlike that we see in Star Wars, in the Star Wars franchise, and in the extended universe, where Force users, Force sensitives, have the ability to use those skills without being taught that they exist, A, and B, that how to use them. So I just threw that out there after this last episode of The Mandalorian, episode 7. I've tried to avoid any spoilers concerning that episode, so I'm not going to mark this video with a spoiler warning. I tried to be more generic in how I discussed them. So please give me your thoughts. Let me know what you think concerning training is related to a Force sensitive, with somebody with Force powers and the ability to use those in some degree. So that's the video for today. Again, I'd like to encourage you. I've got Santa's mailbox back here. If there's a topic you'd like to discuss or a question you'd like to me to address, please let me know, and we'll pull it out of the mailbox and we'll talk about it in a future episode. Until then, I'm extremely excited. I'm down to about 23 hours until my viewing of The Rise of Skywalker. I'm extremely excited about it. A little bit apprehensive and nervous, but I'm looking forward to being able to see that tomorrow and then discussing it afterwards. So you all take care. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. And may the Force be with you. And Merry Christmas.